having an LOI fall apart is not a bad thing. Never getting to LOI is a bad thing. Don't fall in love with the deal. You may find out that this is not something you want to do, but in the end, I can't stop you from pulling the trigger on this thing. This is you all day long. You're going to lead diligence. We'll map it out and we're going to walk you through what it looks like and how this happens. But this is not for you just to say, well, hey, will you have the call with the seller? Hey, will you talk to my lender and deal with this for me? That's not what's happening. Yeah, for the most part, I think the easiest way to say it is that we're really M&A buy-side advisory. You could say that we're an accelerator for independent search, which is true as well too. But we're really trying to move a lot more towards the M&A buy-side advisory. And the reason that I would say that we are also the accelerator side of it is because, we've got a product called the Accelerator, and that's really where we got started. I mean, the company itself really kind of started in the digital space a number of years ago, where they were helping individuals to identify businesses for sale in the digital space, how to purchase them, how to improve them, how to cash flow, how to sell them if they wanted, but for the most part, it's the acquisition side of it. We got involved in brick and mortar here back in 2019, specifically in the home services businesses. At that point in time, that's where we really kind of made a pivot to it. And then we spent the next couple of years fleshing out again this system, the Accelerator, to get people in to do self-guided, do-it-yourself M&A. How to learn to identify the businesses, how to build your investment thesis. We had a lot of training around it. We've got a lot of people that have gone through and been successful. We have a lot of people that don't. And you'll get people that get pissed. And they're like, well, this isn't what I thought it would be. And oftentimes, I think they were hoping that it would be easier, or there'd be a secret to finding a good deal. And there's not. I mean, you guys all know that. It was really just trying to teach them what has to happen and how you use best practices to get there. But over the last year, we have really begun to pivot even more so that we are spending more time trying to provide deal flow. So as Darren's part of the Accelerator Plus program, that's where we've got a group that's trying to search on a daily basis for on-market deals. And that's going to be a lot of your typical places, Biz Buy Sell, Deal Stream, Axial. We use most of the platforms, but then we'll also leverage a lot of the broker relationships we've got, where we're trying to get kind of more of the pocket listing type of stuff. And we're also spending a significant amount of time right now trying to revamp and retool our off-market funnel, which is a lot of work. We're actually trying to find individuals that own these businesses that aren't actively listed. And we've got a few deals under LOI right now on these types of deals. But for the most part, that's what we're trying to do is provide deal flow, because that's where everybody struggles the most. And that's where I'd say that's really our transition to being that M&A buy-side advisor, because that's truly where we're looking at it more so nowadays. And we've got bigger ideas down the road of the things we want to do post-acquisition, and we can talk to some of those. But to keep it simple on the front end, that's what I would say that we do more so than anything else is to provide that buy-side advisor, and specifically really beginning to focus more on deal flow.
Okay. So that's a big pivot from what you're known for, which is, being the accelerator, investing in these businesses and then doing these mini roll-ups. So did that last time we spoke, you had about 8 companies that were about to exit. Did that happen? Or that first exit, did that happen? And how did it evolve?
We didn't do, we still have a group of businesses that we want to roll into this next iteration. But, like most things, I think we're probably looking at least June, if not later down the road. I personally would like to see it push out a little bit more. That's kind of the separation between, what I do as president of Acquira and what our CEO does. He's kind of on to bigger and better things. And I kind of like him there. He stays out of the kitchen. Allows me to do the day-to-day. But that is still actively what we want to do. It's just I am very much driven on the operational side of things on the day to day, which is going to be deal flow specific. So, doing these micro roll ups and moving things towards ESOP driven models and in co-investing in deals, these are all things that we want to be able to do on a larger scale, and these are all things that there's still access to do. But I'm really trying to focus more on where people really want the most help, and that is it's deal flow. I mean, it's not complicated, right?
Yeah.
That's where everybody struggles.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about deal flow. How do you help these guys, uh, build deal flow? How do you manage that flow? How do you build efficiencies and not wasting that flow and all the good stuff?
Yeah, on the on-market side of things, and we make a differentiation between on-market and off-market. On the on-market side of things, listed businesses, it's going to be making sure we've got an investment thesis that works. When guys come in, and I say guys because is it all guys on this? I
Yes.
mean, that's typically what it is.
Yeah.
But when AEs, acquisition entrepreneurs, come into the pipeline, through the sales process, we have them complete an investment thesis. And we want to understand what that looks like, what types of businesses, where at, what are some of the specifics behind them, what is your thesis really? And we do that on the sales side because we don't take in just anybody. Somebody that says, hey, I've got money to spend, I want to do this. From a sales side, that's great. As a sales guy, perfect. I got one closed and we've got some in the system. That's not really how we operate because we don't have room for everybody on this. And we're also not looking for people that are going to have very narrow investment thesis. If you're going to say, hey, I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I need to find a business that's doing 1.7 million to 2 million a year, and I don't want to pay more than a 3x, and it needs to be within 20 minutes of my house, that's going to be a failure for us. And nobody's going to be happy when it's said and done because you're looking for an absolute unicorn. So we wouldn't take that on. We would say, listen, if you want to expand to Tennessee and maybe a couple of additional states, and you're willing to do something a little lower on the SD if it makes sense, and you're willing to expand your thesis, we can do this. But there needs to be some understanding around what the true expectations are and the accountability to that. That's a big piece of what I've been working on is ensuring that we're well aligned on expectations and accountability. But what we'll do with this is once we got the investment thesis in hand and it makes sense and it's broad enough to work, the on-market team will start sourcing that first day that they come in. And we're going to be looking to make sure that we've got, again, all of our sources covered as far as the places we're scraping and looking at a daily basis. And we've got a team that's basically pulling the sims in and that we're trying to go through. We use a fair amount of AI on the front end to kind of try to separate the wheat from the chaff. But then we're going to get into these deals as quick as we can. And one of the things I would say that's probably a little bit different in what we do than an independent searcher is I think we're faster to get to deals because this is one of the things that's important, and you'll hear us talk about it a lot. And oftentimes, and I'm sure this group has had this situation where you've lost deals because they've gone under contract while you were discussing. And for us, we try to be quick. I mean, I like to tell people, hey, if we see a good deal, I don't want to be the LOI at the end of the day because we can certainly figure a couple of things out when we're at the table and we've got exclusivity, but I don't want to sit there and try to work all the angles and all the questions only to find out that somebody else went under contract with this thing. We'll dictate some of the specifics when we're actually sitting down negotiating. We'll find what's important to the buyer. I'm sorry, to the seller on this and in communication between the buyer and the seller. So I would say that's probably one of the things that we do more so than an independent, which sounds simple, and it is, but it's one of the advantages is that we are faster to pull trigger on deals. And I think that seems to be a difficult thing for self-guided searchers at times to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, the tricky part is to going back and the art of going back and renegotiating, retrading that LOI. That's the piece. Because when you're kind of sending those LOIs so fast, you're not really So you're telling me you're sending the LOI before you even have sat with the seller, talked for a while, understood kind of like the motivation and the drivers?
If it's a strong deal, absolutely.
Yeah, got it.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
Because, think about it this way. Um, One of the big things we're going to really try to instill in our AEs is that, we're getting private equity feeding down into the space, right? You guys are familiar with this. They're not well matched to $1 million SD business, but that doesn't mean they're not going to try. The success with that, there usually isn't a lot of success. There's a pretty brutal transitions for the employees, and the sellers don't necessarily understand that or know that, right? But if you can have that conversation about that on the front end, if you make that something they're aware of, you can change the conversation from dollars and cents to something that's a little more intangible with them. And oftentimes, this is a business that they created 27 years ago, and they know these people like family. And when they start understanding what this is actually going to be like, what this transition could be like for their employees, it gives you a different place to negotiate from. So, what we're trying to do is create buyers that are the right buyer to steward a business forward. The intention is to not lose a single employee. It's not to come in and streamline operations. It's not to change a bunch of things that Jay, listen, you're a plumber. I mean, you're obviously not a business operator. I see so many places where you failed on this business. I have sat in conversations like that and my mouth just drops open. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, way to get off on the right foot with the seller, right?
yeah.
You're a clown. You're miserably, overstaffed here, and you're doing that. No, that's not the relationship. So you want to make sure that you are coming to this from a different place than dollars and cents, and you need to get to the table and you need to find out what's important to the seller. Why are they selling the business? You'd be surprised some of the reasons people are selling businesses. I'll tell you one I hear over and over again. I love to be out in the field and do the work. I can't deal with the admin. I can't deal with the headache of my employees anymore. It's just killing me. If I could deal with that, and the first thing I want to say is you could hire somebody to take care of that for you. But listen, we're negotiating sales, so I'm not going to volunteer that right now. But yeah, there's all sorts of solutions to this. But you need to find out why. Once you find out what's going on and why, it allows you to begin to negotiate the transaction in a different way, right?
Yeah, we have someone in the group right now who's under contract on a landscaping business where the previous seller still works there and the new seller wants to stay there. So two generations of owners still want to be there
Yeah.
because of that exact scenario that you mentioned where they didn't want to deal with people anymore. They just want to do the work. One of them wants to do the actual landscaping. The other one wants to sell, and but they don't want to deal with people. So let's go back a couple steps. When you talked about thesis, I'm assuming I'm sure there are probably 2 or 3 profiles of pieces that you see that come through or that work for you guys. I'm assuming they're the home services category, there's the manufacturing category, and maybe some technology or B2B type services category. Is that the case, or what other pieces you find out there?
Yes, it is. However, we are expanding that. And I have really been a big proponent of doing this because, we have an arrangement with a capital fund, an equity fund that was created to partner on deals. But really, we don't have ownership of that fund. Right. This was a fund that was created because they like what we do. Right.
Okay.
And they've got a bunch of LPs that have invested. It's not a large fund. It's a $10 million fund, but they're going to come in with down payment assistance or capital injections for the most part with something they'll take 20 to maybe 30%, somewhere in that range, depending on an exit for contributing up to 80% of the required equity injection. That fund itself is really geared around those sectors you just indicated, home services and manufacturing. But using that fund or any other equity investor is ultimately the buyer's decision. That's your decision. Do you need it? Do you want it? What does that look like to you? But when you come to me, you come to Acquira and you're looking to source a business, if you don't need it, why am I going to tell you what you should buy? Now, we like those sectors and there's very specific reasons. But like I've said, listen, if you're fourth generation nail salon and there's 20 people in your family that run nail salons very successfully, and that's what you're looking for, and we're able to find one that's got dynamite fundamentals and the financials look great, why in the world would I not be interested in helping you to do that? I'm not going to be involved in the deal, but ultimately, you didn't come to me for that. So that is one of the things that we are expanding out right now, which is outside of, I would say, the digital space, e-commerce, we're really not going to get into that because it's just, there's a whole nother world for that. And you can go find that someplace else. But if you're going to talk about brick and mortar for the most part, I don't really care what it is. Just doesn't mean we're going to be involved in it or might not have equity or capital partners for participation to it. But we'll help you find something. I would say, to your point though, on the investment thesis, what does it typically look like? I want to make sure that we've got probably 10 MSAs that have a million people plus. I mean, if you're talking service, you can't be looking in some place it's 17,000 people and, the nearest other city is 3 hours away. But hey, I'm the only game in town, so this is going to be great. We were involved in one of those, and I may have even brought that up last time and couldn't get the A to get off of this idea and found out the first week that he took that business over that the lead tech at the company wasn't sticking around. He was leaving to start up his own business, be direct competition. Right. So, we want some specific things like there's got to be a base. We're probably seeing for the most part, $750,000 to $1.5 million is the sweet spot. Geez, everybody wants a $2 million SD business, right? But you're going to start negotiating with higher multiples and you're going to start dealing with private equity at that point in time. Anything less than $750,000, tread carefully there because your margin for error is very, very slight, right? Post debt cash is tough. And, multiples again, you're in that 3x for the most part. That's why we like to be in that space. We feel that there's some price asymmetry in that space. Small deals are priced even 2x, I think or 1x on some of these is priced right because there's a lot of risk. You get above that and you start getting 4+. There's reasons for that. There's competition for those deals. But having buyers looking in at least, like you say, an expanse of 10 MSAs that have 1 million people in some 3-hour proximity to them, being something around services, being something around at least a floor of $750,000 or 600, I would say, at least anyway, and being realistic about what the top end looks like, and what you can afford. We'll get some people that come in sometimes too, and they just don't have much money, and they're looking for these $2 million businesses, and they want to talk about Perry pass-through loans and multiple equity partners, and it's like, man, that's a lot to chew off on your first pass-through, right?
Yeah.
So we want to get people that are realistic.
Makes sense. How about the expectations you mentioned? What are the expectations on both ends?
The expectation, one, is that you lead. This is your deal. This is your name on the LOI. And we've run into some problems on this, and we've had to change the way we do some things because we want to try to provide an awful lot of value and a lot of support and guidance. We've got situations where people have just said, well, you guys are going to tell me what to do. Well, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you right off the bat that makes me immediately go, oh, that sounds like liability right there. I don't want any part of that, right? I smell problems down the road there. So that is really the first on the expectations and accountability. And those two go hand in hand for me, is understanding that this is your deal. Ultimately, you make all the decisions on this. We are your support. We are your team that can help guide you through this. We understand the milestones. We understand the way things should go. We've got a lot of experience in bringing ideas up on ways you might structure or things you might look out for, but it's your decision. I mean, if we're saying, wow, all signs point to no on this, and you say, I love this thing, you're going to hear us say, wow, big lesson here, Jay. Don't fall in love with the deal. You may find out that this is not something you want to do, but in the end, I can't stop you from pulling the trigger on this thing. This is you all day long. So understanding that you're going to lead diligence, we'll map it out and we're going to walk you through what it looks like and how this happens. But this is not for you just to say, well, hey, will you have the call with the seller? Hey, will you talk to my lender and deal with this for me? That's not what's happening, right? You're going to lead this. You're going to be intimately involved. We're actually trying to put a few more hoops in for our A's right now, which one of them is I want to make sure that you guys put a strong deck together and present it to an executive group prior to final investment decision. For two reasons. One, I think it's very good to get, again, other people's input on this, but primarily it's that you are actively engaged in the diligence. You are having to put this deck together so that you understand every component of what's happening. Because afterwards hearing, well, I didn't really understand that, or I thought that was something that you were taking care of, or I thought the attorney was doing that, right? Those are the things that we want to make sure to avoid. So that's the accountability portion as well too.
Got it. That makes sense. So, you don't. So do you give them a list of like to build their own deal team, so you're not involved anymore in that?
Oh no, we're involved, but it's just that you'll have like say Rich is our lead guy for our transaction advisory services. He will be on many of those calls.
Okay.
So it's just that what we had a gal whose deal fell apart. She had a full-time job. She had a medical practice and she was looking to do this. And she kind of took this approach of, well, you guys will let me know what needs to happen next. And it was, I kind of kidded. It was almost to this point of, I'll give you my bank account information. You just let me know when they're going to start depositing checks. Right. I'm like, that's not how this is working. So, understanding that you're going to lead this. You are intimately involved. This is your name. You had better have the relationship with the seller, because if it's our tax advisor who has a relationship, again, that's going to be a problem after this thing funds, right? So you have to be leading it. And it's not that we have the expectation that you understand what you're doing and that you are the person leading the direction. We'll provide the blueprint and the roadmap, and we will make sure that you've got, the advisors on the team, and we'll give you choices of your Q of E providers and your legal diligence providers, and we'll do all of that. But you just have to be intimately involved.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. What do you recommend for your AEs in terms of involvement from day one? So let's just say you found a company that you think will be a good fit for them. How does that process go? You send them the information, they look at it. They have to engage with the broker or the seller, set up a face-to-face meet. What are those steps?
If it's on market, it's going to be we want to get deals in front of, AEs to be able to take a look at. We have to be careful to some extent because, you'll get some AEs that really want to ask a ton of questions right off the bat on something. They don't want to have any kind of commitment to it. It's like, do you want to sit down and have the call or not? Because we can't play middleman on this all day long. Is this of interest or not? And again, if there's one thing that I would say that everybody takes from this is, do not be afraid to pull the trigger on an LOI. Do not be afraid to get into the diligence process on things. You can walk away at any point in time you want to walk away. And this is not to say be a lousy buyer that's just kicking tires and wasting time, but do not be afraid to pull the trigger and get there. So the process, getting a deal like an on-market deal in front and having someone say, yeah, I like this. This looks good. I'm interested in this. From the on-market side, what we're going to try to do at that point in time then is actually, get it under LOI. So we are going to negotiate. We are going to ask, we've got kind of our deal killer questions that we go through. For the most part, it's going to take care of 80% of it. We're trying to get a real good feel as quick as we can on it. And then we're going to try to get this thing countersigned as fast as we can. We want to be able to, again, get exclusivity and get to the table. So that may mean that you've got AEs who have a couple deals fall apart, right? In diligence. That's okay. Again, another place where you're going to learn an awful lot, right? That's a stage of the game. A lot of self-guided are going to spend a lot of time in.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with going through diligence on 4 deals and funding your 5th, because you will know a whole hell of a lot more on funding that 5th than you would have if it would have gone just seamlessly start to finish, because there are some things that weren't seamless. You just didn't know it.
So let me go back to, so are you writing yourself? You sending those LOIs directly, or are you having the AE to do that?
No, the team will draft the LOI and we'll get it signed by the seller, and then we'll have the AE sign it, or vice versa, wherever we're at kind of in the, communication chain.
So you're going fast. You're not setting up like meetings pre-LOI.
We can. I mean, if that's one of the things where that's something that the seller wants, or that the buyer really desires. Again, we're here to assist and guide, but we're just trying to use our level of experience to say, let's get this quick so we can get this off the market and get talking.
Got it. Okay. And then, what are some of those deal killer questions that you mentioned?
Simple things like the depth of your management team. Do you have a management team? How often are you working? How much do you work? What does your customer concentration look like? We all look at financials. You guys are all astute. I mean, you can look at those and for the most part, determine if there's something that smells really strange right from the very beginning. But this is, again, something where those kinds of really odd things, it could be a killer. Ask it and get an answer on it. Don't spend a lot of time getting beyond that, because again, while you're developing your 72 questions and hoping to answer all of them, they've grown tired of you and they've signed with somebody else.
Yeah.
But are you involved in any kind of legal procedure at any time? Is there a lawsuit pending? Is there anything I should know around this? Just kind of your quick typicals on things. Those are the kinds of things we're going to roll through for the most part and ask quickly. And then, diligence actually post LOI, within that first week, there's another list of things we're going to try to hit pretty quickly, and really try to hit a strong handful of things before quality of earnings.
Got it. So that's the part where the most of the typical searchers shy away from going under LOI, is because of the deal fees, the broken deal fees. So what you're saying is that you're doing a good chunk of due diligence before you go to QOV, before you actually start spending money.
Oh yeah. That's what we would really like to be able to do, right? I mean, that's what you continually try to do, is develop an ever iterating list of questions where you're hoping to, it's the 80-20, you're hoping to catch the bulk of it up front.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what are some of the things that you catch in that, in that gap, that period between LOI sign to start of QOV? What is the timeline there actually? How many, is that a couple of weeks? Is that a month? Is that a week?
I would say it's within a month, right?
Within a month you start QOV.
It could be sooner. I don't think oftentimes it's going to be much longer than that. And again, every deal is different, right? The seller's going on vacation, or there's some reason it's going to take longer, or my taxes aren't done. They will be in 3 weeks, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But I would say we want to get started on it quickly. And I would say within a month, we should be ready to move the quality of earnings reports. But this is where you are spending money. So we do want to get a number of these things answered on it. On On market, off market, you can deal with the same thing though. That doesn't necessarily mean that um, you've got highly knowledgeable individuals working on that side of it. I mean, you guys all know what it's like to deal with some of these brokers. I mean, a lot of brokers are just they're residential real estate agents, and
Correct.
oftentimes they really don't have any business being involved in what they're doing right now. They can be a much more of a hindrance than a help. And the sellers, I mean, again, um, they're electricians, they're plumbers. They don't necessarily understand. This is what my accountant told me. This is what he gave me. I don't have anything else for you. Dealing with, here's all the PDFs of my financials. Can we get these in an Excel spreadsheet at least or something? No, this is what I've got. Okay, this is going to take a long time. I mean, to do this. Well, I need it done at the end of the week. It's like, then you need to provide me something else, right? I mean, you're going to deal with this type of stuff. So,
Yeah.
but that is what we're really trying to look to do is get as much of it looked at before quality of earnings, but quality of earnings as well too. This is where you actually are going to dig in. If you're good, if you're strong on the finance side, if you're a CPA or you really get how to dig into financials, you can certainly help yourself and you can get through a lot of these questions up front because when it does get to QV, you've got somebody who really does know it and they are going to dig in, but it is going to cost you money, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's why I'm trying to understand because for me, it's like as soon as you sign that LOI, you're sending that list right away, and then you're going to QOV as soon as you get those documents. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what do you catch in between? What are that month or a couple of weeks? What are the things that you can catch before you can start QOV?
Well, the biggest would just be, do the financials make sense?
Okay.
Right. I mean, am I looking at something where I've got immediate questions on this? Because if I've got immediate questions right now, I can ask these questions and try to get them answered. Like, the financials just don't make sense to me. There's something that's way off, or these ad backs that you've got. I've got big questions around these ad backs, the validity of them, or even what they're for, or who they're for, whatever it may be, right? These are the types of things that you do want to get asked because if you wait, they will be asked through the Q of E. I'll assure you of that, but you will have spent money to do it.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Anything else that you would catch before starting that process?
Um, yeah, as much as again, every deal is unique. It's going to be what you see and what stands out to you. More than anything, it's just when you've got big questions, right? And I would say it ends up oftentimes being those things like um, customer concentration is a big one. Employees is another one, whether they be contractors or not, or how they're paid, or whether you've got management layers of experience or who's dealing with what. Um, Strange ad backs, one-time ad backs are questions as well too. Do you have the tax returns? We'll hear this a lot of times too. Is I've got full financials. I've got the last 3 years, and they're audited financials. Do you have the tax returns? No. It's like, well, you're going to want to see the tax returns as well too, because as you guys know, what shows up on financials and tax returns sometimes can look like two very different businesses. And SBA is going to really, they're going to have questions on it as well too, right? So,
Yep.
that's another thing. If you've got a good SBA lender, if you've been through it or somebody, those are good people to ask because they're going to have their highlight list of the types of things that they see pretty quickly that kill deals as well too.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And so we talked about the on-market stuff. Now tell me about the off-market stuff and what that
Well,
process look like for you.
off market's going to look a little bit different because, again, we're trying to get a hold of people that own businesses that may have some interest. We do a lot of work through lead magnets that are going to be valuation calculators for the most part. That's probably one of the more successful ways that we generate it. But then it's the conversation of following up with these folks to see if they've got any kind of interest actually in selling. And we're not coming to this from the perspective of the private equity calls, which if it's a good business, they get a lot of, right? It's not just independent searchers. Independent searchers are probably less so than private equity. But what we are really trying to sell is our ecosystem, which is we're not buying businesses. What we're trying to do is identify and train the right successor we're trying to find the right buyer for your business. And we really want to talk about what that looks like to them as well. When we're sourcing off market, one of the big advantages right off the bat is there's no seller commissions, right? We're going to look to get this transaction to happen. This $3 million business that they sell is not going to cost them $300,000 out of proceeds. And when they begin to understand that, that drives it as well too. Having this handoff and what that looks like, and I'm going to skip ahead to this handoff of, communicating with the seller and the buyer, is delicate to say the least, because this person, you don't know how committed they are to selling right now. Some of them definitely are. So some of them have been working on it, or they've really thought about it, or they've had some things go sideways. Others are just, you caught them at the right week, right? So you want to be really careful how you do that. So for us, a lot of it is relationship driven. And that's why we really kind of sell the prospect of the ecosystem. Because there can be situations to where this deal works out, but it just doesn't work out with Jay. It works out with Andrew instead. And you guys are both in our system, and Jay took first swing at it, but something just didn't jive. And it might not even be you. It might be the day that you talked, or it might be the week or the month or whatever it is, right? Off market is a fickle animal that way. And it's really, really relationship driven, right? But it's going to be more or less the same process. As we're going to try to get this owner, hopeful seller on board with, yeah, I am interested in selling. And we're going to talk the same thing. We go through a valuation process. We're going to try to find something that's in the ballpark. And then we're going to get at least the owner to sign on this thing and say, yeah, I'm committed to this. And then we can go to the other side to say, hey, do you have interest in this? And get an ace that says, yeah, I'm in. I do have interest in this. And again, this is where we'll go to the diligence table on things and try to uncover a lot of it. We can spend more time pre-LOI on off market than on market, because there's somebody else. That's right. So we do try to spend a little more time clearing some of this up, but sometimes, again, it's driven by the seller. If the seller's in a situation where they just say, or the owner, I should say, hey, I do want to do this, but I really want to, can we get some sign out this week? Because I might want to talk to somebody next week. And if I can get this done, I don't have to deal with it. And even though there are some questions you should ask, the answer is sure. If that's what we need to do, that's what we'll do. Right. So it's not a straight line. None of this is a straight line, right? There's oftentimes you're going to loop back to things, and because you're dealing with people.
Yeah. So do you transfer them to the AE after they have kind of committed to a certain range of price, or you do that post meeting the AE?
That can depend as well too. Oftentimes it's going to be before the AE, because we really are going to try to gear this based on kind of what we've got for evaluation. But again, we say the same thing all the time. Diligence is where the pricing is really going to come in and the structure of the deal. One of the things to remember is I have the assumption that everybody involved in this call is probably going to use SBA for their funds for the most part.
Yeah.
Is whatever it is you think you're working out, and whatever interesting deal the seller thinks they're working out, your lender has a whole different idea. So these things are going to come up. You might get a situation where the seller thinks, well, it's worth $5 million all day long, and it's not quite, but you really love it. You wind it up there and you say, that's 4.3, that's a little higher than I wanted in the multiple, but I'll go ahead and do it because it makes sense. There's some mitigating factors. And then the lender looks at it and says, no fucking way. No. This isn't happening this way. This thing, you might get it. It's, ratchet it down to 4.4 million from 5. And this is something we'd be willing to lend on. So that's always kind of an ace in your back pocket as well too. And we say that up front, right? We want everybody to be happy on this thing, but in the end, Paul doesn't have $5 million in his back pocket. He's going to be getting it from a bank, and the banks can have some specific questions and some guidelines to it. And I'm beholden to it. Paul's beholden to it, and the seller's beholden to it, unless they want to find somebody else, right?
Okay. So the idea is that I'll give you what you want, but this is going to be subject to the bank saying it's okay.
Well, and what we uncover as well as we go through.
Yes.
Because really, when you're dealing with off market, you're really talking about some folks that may not have a firm grasp on everything that's happening on their financials, right? We're going to go through their financials and we've looked at it, but it's still going to come back on. We're going to need to see more on this. We're going to need to actually dig in a little bit deeper on these things. But if what you're telling me is true, if this is correct, then this is probably reasonable.
Okay. That makes sense. Hey guys, feel free to ask any questions. I know I could probably ask a million questions until.
Well, and I know that, there's a lot of specific things we could talk about too, but the
Yeah, please.
thing that I'll say is that I don't get into a ton of specifics because every deal is so unique. I mean, in every situation really is more than anything, you just have to learn to be flexible, be the right buyer on deals. That's going to go further than anything else.
So give us an example. Give an example of like the right buyer that you worked with, and then the right business, and then the right transition, the right transaction, and the right transition. Like think of a good example.
A guy buying an off-market deal out of Colorado Springs right now that is an electrical contractor, and the guy that's buying it was a C-level exec. He has an electrical engineering degree, and he was in the military. But this isn't anything. I mean, it would help with him getting his license and doing some additional things. And he understands, in theory, the work of wiring up a light switch. I mean, he understands it, but he's not an electrician. But he's got that background, and he's just a nice guy. And he has sat down and been very direct with the seller about asking questions and meeting him face to face a number of times, and talking about how, this is Colorado Springs and there's a lot of opportunity for military contracts here. And the seller saying, yeah, you know what? I always thought about that, but it never really worked. But for someone like you, that could be a huge thing. And him starting to think down the line of, yeah, here's the types of things you could do with it. Man, if you could do this, that'd be great. And him really getting involved in the employees. Tell me about the employees. He does what? He's great. And who would you promote? And making sure that seller is understanding that you build a great team, and I'm going to be leaning on all these people. I don't know this, right? They know the business, and I'm really going to be heavily dependent on them. What can I do to help? What's their biggest issue you guys deal with right now? What could I bring as Santa Claus in on month number 1 to actually help? A lot of times it ends up being benefits or something along that, or solving some problem, or fixing a water cooler. It's something, right? But you ask these types of things. And if the seller begins to understand that you really are actively engaged in the business and the stewardship of the business, if you're actively engaged in the stewardship of the business through the community, you talked about a landscaping company, right?
Yeah.
More than any other industry, I see landscaping companies that carry the name of the owner along. And I'll tell you, this comes up quite often. Tell me concerns on selling the business. Here's one of my concerns. I've had this business for 33 years, and it says Gallagher Landscaping. And I'm going to be really stressed out watching those trucks go up and down the street if the guy who's running that business is not solid, if he's not taking care of the customers out there, because my name's still attached to it, right? So you have to hit on the things outside the financial scope. You need to hit on the things that are the people part of the equation. And if you can speak to the people part of the equation and you can find common ground there, and he understands you to be a good person who's interested in his people, which are his family for the most part, that's going to go a long ways. And that ends up being the right buyer. To try to bullshit your way through how I know how to manage an electrical company or a plumbing company when I don't have experience is absolutely the wrong way to go. To be able to say, I know that I can add value to the business and I can bring capital and I can bring um, motivation, which is oftentimes something the seller has lost. This is why some of these businesses are languishing a little bit and why they're selling oftentimes. I can bring all of these things and motivation and change on the people side because, again, we talk about this. That's the people I can't deal with. I can bring change to the people side of it. Then you become something a little bit different and you energize that seller to some extent. And he or she can become aligned with what you're actually looking to try to do, which is, again, beyond just the financial side of things. That's where you have good, strong alignment as the buyer of choice. This electrical deal in Colorado Springs, they're going to go back and adjust this price now for the third time. And all three times it's been downward because of something that's happened, right? And the seller is 100% committed to this, and this thing's going to happen. And it will end up being probably started at maybe 2.8. I think it will get done at 2.1. That's a pretty big swing, right? But the seller's committed because he knows this is the right guy for his people. He knows he's going to drive this business forward. He sees the opportunity that's there for him. He's bought into the future vision.
So what is the percentage of sellers are in that profile versus the seller that's just trying to exit, max out the purchase price and move on?
I couldn't say what number that is or what percentage that is, but what I can say is be aware of that seller because more often than not, there are cultural issues at that business that are going to be a problem for you.
Yeah. 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 That's why
And you can fix financial. You have a real hard time fixing culture.
yeah, that's not my seller. That's someone else's seller. That's what I usually say. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so in terms of transition, that profile of the ideal candidate buying their ideal business, what does that ideal transition look like?
As far as post acquisition,
Yeah, post acquisition.
that's part of what you want to be figuring out through the diligence, right? I mean, what that really can you work together? Do you want to work together? What is it? What is that person going to do? They really want to work in the field. It's a landscaping business, and part of the business, hopefully, is beyond the mow, blow, and go type of stuff. You've got architecture, you've got build and design, or design and build. You've got other factors or other components of this business that make it a strong business. Perhaps he's the architect, or there's a junior there that he's training, and he wants to be in the field. Understanding what that's going to look like and how long he's going to be. Is he going to stay full time? I mean, with the SBA changes, you got an opportunity to do that now, which is great. But that transition, the optimal, is shorter than you think. If the seller is going to stay on in a position in the business, make sure you understand specifically what that looks like and that you're aligned on the expectations for what you're going to do going forward. Because one of the wonkiest places where things really get tough is you're going to be instituting a lot of changes there, many of which have been asked of the seller, the previous owner, by the employees many times before. And so you have this tectonic shift at some point in time, usually around the 60 to 90 day mark, where people have got off of the old owner's boat and onto the new owner's boat. And there's this weird vibe that starts to happen, right? And sometimes the only people who stay are the people that you're not going to keep because they're trying to suck up to the old owner like they used to anyway, because they don't like you and they don't like the way things are happening, but they've kind of forgotten that the owner doesn't matter anymore, right? That's not going to work anymore. But you get into some weird power dynamics. So the length of time is shorter than you think. A lot of times you're going to have people say a year. If you can get that in the contract, that's great, but you're not going to want it.
Yeah.
Longer than 6 months is a rarity. By the time you get to the 90-day mark, you and the rest of the staff are probably ready for the owner to go. Yeah. If you're if they're not going to be intimately involved in something on a day to day, if it's just a transition, allow yourself more time. But about the 90-day period of time, um, everybody's ready for the owner not to be involved anymore.
So on the programs that you have now, that so you have the buy side advisory split up between on market, off market, or are all combined?
The LOI advisory, LOI to close.
Yeah,
Oh,
whatever the programs you have now,
it doesn't matter when
it doesn't
somebody
matter.
comes in through the if somebody comes into the accelerator and it's the self-guided, it's self-guided. I mean, you've got group calls and you've got Slack channels and you've got access to people and you can ask your questions and do what you want, but it is you taking it through. We'll help give you some individuals to use for diligence and things of that nature, but it is you. If you want to pay for advisory services, you can do that. You can pay for advisory services, which are LOI to close on
And
that.
how much is that?
That's 25 grand to do it. We'll take 12.5 up front and 12.5 at close. If you want to sign up to do your self-guided side, we'll do that. When it's the Accelerator Plus and you come in and it's us finding deal flow for you, um, those task services are included as part of it. Diligence services, we've got 15 grand for QOV, 15 grand for legal, and we've got some standing contracts with our providers where they'll honor those price levels. And that's part of the fee that you pay. There is no difference on that transaction advisory services, whether it be on market or off market, because you don't know what it's going to be for you as that Accelerator Plus AE. You may find the right deal that's on market. It may be an off market deal. We're looking at both channels, and the hope is what we really are trying to do is develop that off market proprietary channel more so than anything. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
I want a deal that nobody else is negotiating on. I want a deal that nobody else knows about.
And this is the tough thing. You guys, I think, had it before. You had people making calls, and then you stopped
Yeah,
it.
we did because it just wasn't effective because there's so many moving pieces to it. There's so much work to that portion of it. And they were doing it. And this was when I was just kind of coming on and doing more from the change management, the post engagement or the post acquisition portion.
Yeah.
And it was just not well done. So we shut it down, and then we brought it back. We started to revamp it in third quarter last year, and we pretty much just fired it up at the start of this year, the end of December, because there's so many different odds and ends and components to it that if you're going to do it well, it's a lot of work. So we are doing it again now. We're having success with it. We've got a handful of LOIs that countersign that are active in diligence right now that are off market deals. But like I said, it's a real delicate tap dance on that one.
And you have like people just making phone calls, or you're just doing it via email and
all, all of the above. A lot of it starts off, we're very good on the marketing side of things as a company. So on our buyer funnel to get people into the Accelerator Plus, we've got a lot of flow. We probably see 100 folks that sign up for calls that they want to sit down and have a call like this a week on the buy side. And so we implement the same type of thing on the off market funnel. And a lot of it revolves around the valuation calculators. We'll do a lot of calculators and people that are looking for that. And then they'll schedule calls if they are actually serious, because we'll send something out. If they hit certain variables that make sense to us, we like the sector, the size, we'll send a follow-up to it, or we'll just be reaching out directly to those people anyway. We'll drip on them. We'll call them directly. We'll do a number of different things from there. And I would say of the people that go through the calculators and complete the calculators, which we do a pretty good job of targeting those as well too. But of the individuals that do, and they're what we call qualified businesses, the ones that fit our dynamic, our variables, we're probably at about 20% of getting financials out of those people. One of every 5 calls to those people will actually get financials out of them and have them interested in going further into what we're doing, which is pretty strong, really.
yeah. Yeah, that's really and that's the group that you move forward, or you move people regardless of getting financials.
No, we don't. We don't. If we can't get financials, we're not moving forward with
Got it.
anything. I mean, that's the last thing we want to do is tell Darren we've got a deal in his area and we're just waiting to hear back from the seller. I mean, I could just look through the yellow pages and say there's all sorts of deals in your area, right? So
Yeah.
it needs to be something where we've got financials and a seller is interested in knowing more about it. And really, before there's any kind of introduction, it needs to be a seller that said, yeah, okay, I'm in. I like this. This makes sense to me. I'm in on that. Now we can have the conversation.
Got it. So right now the components are the accelerator, which is the education piece, and then the buy side advisory on top of it, or is that included?
No, that's separate. You can if you come in just the accelerator and you want to do self-guided all the way through, you can do that. And we've had any number of people that have bought businesses, gone through it, done it on their own.
Got
If you get into it, especially about the time that you're getting to LOI and you start realizing, I see the roadmap here, but I just don't know if I've got the chops to do this,
Yeah.
then you can say, I'd like to sign up for your services and help me guide me through this thing to close. Right.
And what are
The
you?
other side,
What is the cost of the accelerator now?
the accelerator's $9,500
Okay. And then you have that 25K for the buy side advisory. And then if they decide to move to the plus, that's when what does that look like on the plus side?
The Accelerator Plus ends up being it's 150,000 all in. It's 75,000 up front, and then it's 37.5 in two separate phases. 37.5, the first phase happens at countersigned LOI. The second phase happens at FID, final investment decision, so that you're all in. And I think we talked about this before, but this is one of the things I'll mention is you guys probably all know it's the SBA guidelines. Your bank, your SBA lender isn't telling you that they need to see 5% down or 10% down or 20% down payment. It's capital equity into the deal. So that 150,000 that we charge, that covers task advisory services. It covers deal sourcing. It also covers your diligence providers, Q of E and your legal. That's equity into the deal. So that 150 is included in as what the SBA wants to see in the deal. So if you did let's say you did $1.5 million deal and they wanted to see 10% and you spent 150 for us, your 150 is in.
Got it. It's kind of like the deal cost, and that's part of your total cost of the transaction.
Yep. Right.
Okay, so essentially you have the ability to finance kind of that component. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And any final thoughts? I know we're at the hour. Any final thoughts that you want our guys to remember, or anything that have you seen the last 12 months that any big changes that are happening right now that you want to make them aware of?
Well, SBA changes, and you guys are probably aware of those, right? There's big SBA changes, which are helpful for what you guys are doing. You've been in a little bit of a desert here lately. I mean, December, January, February are just tough months in general anyway. Things are about to open up, but as interest rates start to adjust again, I think you're going to see a real flood of stuff come to the market. So I think by the time we get towards the end of Q2 here, I expect to really see things pick up a bit more. But if it's anything I would leave, it would be what I said earlier, which is don't be afraid to issue an LOI on a deal. If you like a deal, if on the surface you like it, it makes sense and it resonates with you and you don't have a bunch of big questions on this thing, get to the table and then sell yourself to the buyer, find a personal connection there, and then start going through your questions. And you can massage the deal and modify it to what makes sense for both of you going forward. Right? That's where you have to have the flexibility. Don't ask all your questions prior to LOI or you're going to find out you're going to miss out on a lot of deals.
I think the hardest for me, so I have that block a little bit. The hardest thing for me, because I like to go and meet the seller and have long conversation and build a rapport. But when I get to the point where I set a structure in the deal where, okay, there's 10% seller financing, standby, another 10% amortized, and then the rest is SBA, how do you go straight from giving him what you want, which is he wants an all cash deal or maybe very little seller financing, to negotiating those terms post LOI?
Because oftentimes the financials aren't going to align. I mean, what he said or what he supplied isn't actually true. And that's not just coming from you, it's coming from the QOE provider, that's coming from the lender. And what ends up happening is you say, listen, the only way I can give you 3.7 million. And remember, the 3.7 million he's got in his mind is because it's his lucky number. It's the age of his oldest daughter. It's a buddy sold a business like it for 3.7. Who knows what the reason he stuck on the number for? The only reason, the only way that I can give you 3.7 is it's going to take seller financing to get there.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you coming back. We always learn tremendously. This is a big one for me. So I'm going to start slinging those LOIs for sure.
Yeah. Very good to see you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Questions? Yeah, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, best of luck, you guys. And
Appreciate it.
out there.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, take care.